I have picked up and then discarded several bad habits over my lifetime, but the one I've had the longest and the one which has proved almost impossible to quit is my lifelong addiction to reading the news in the morning. It started, as bad habits often do, with my father. He returned from a difficult year in Vietnam to be stationed at the Marine Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. We lived in Annapolis, and the commute, back then, was reasonable but required a 05:00 departure, and that meant he couldn't read the Washington Post in the morning with breakfast. Then a colleague told him how to get the WAPO early. That's easy, Jeff. Get him a route delivering the WAPO and there'll be a bundle outside your house by 03:00 every morning. I came home from school one day and found a brand new bike sitting in the driveway. It was big too, with large baskets on either side of the rear tire and one on the handlebars too. I was born without a magical thinking gene, so I viewed my new bike with mixed feelings until my dad got home that evening to explain. He told me he needed to read the paper before heading off to work, and the only way to do that was for me to have a paper delivery route, and he found one just 5 miles away and signed me up. He added that as a token of his appreciation, I don't have to pay him back for the new bike. That's the origins of my news addiction, and I have fed it daily for 47 years. I remember listening to Terry Gross of NPR interviewing some famous Hollywood producer back in the 90s, and the producer said something I have never forgotten. It went something like this: I went to my doctor about this profound depression that had settled over me, and his advice was simple. Do not drink any alcohol, none ever, and do not watch or pay attention to the news. The producer went on to say that he has never been happier since following that advice. I figured out the do not drink alcohol part after returning from Afghanistan and finding myself on the verge of homelessness. When life throws you some nasty curveballs, the first thing that should be jettisoned is all alcohol consumption. It's hard to do, but you either do it or become a loser. There are no other alternatives. But quitting the news? It was once unthinkable. Who wants to go through life not knowing a damn thing about what is happening in the world? But now it's a piece of cake, because the news we are being fed by the establishment media is demonstrably fake. It will cause immense cognitive dissonance if you believe what you are being fed, because it is false. Witness the election of Donald Trump. Last May, writing in the Ramsdale Brief, I predicted that Donald Trump would win the presidential race, and I explained why. I never doubted the outcome from that point forward, with one exception. That was when I visited my parents for a week in October and watched Fox News with them. My folks had dialed back their Fox News consumption to just an hour in the evening and were rewarded with the unsettling premonition that our country was about to elect a candidate we felt to be the most corrupt person to ever run for the office. That cost my parents their peace of mind for a few months, but as I reminded them on the 4th of November that it was their fault for watching Fox and believing the narrative over their own lying eyes. The eyes revealed a groundswell of support and enthusiasm for the Donald and zero support for Clinton with the American public. It was clear as a bell, but to the legacy media Trump's win was a shocking surprise. Even after Brexit. I was not alone in predicting the obvious. Many others, such as Bill Mitchell at Your Voice Radio, provided consistent, accurate analysis showing there was no legal way for Clinton to win. The results were a devastating blow to liberal progressives who have reacted with their usual vindictive name-calling, mass hysteria and physical assaults of Trump voters. Families, including mine, have been ripped apart over members voting for Trump. This is a typical example written by a member of my family in response to my post-election schadenfreude meme postings on Facebook. All you do is spread hate and evil and white supremacism. Taking such a strong position on a topic you have done little to no research about is the definition of insanity. My family members are not insane, so how is it that I and many others find ourselves in hot water with those we love over who we supported in a presidential election? The mainstream media narrative, reinforced by academia and the entertainment business, have successfully presented a unified narrative to the public that is based in a liberal progressive agenda, not on facts. It is the unified nature of this agenda that is troubling. The journalist scandal demonstrated how news topics and spin are coordinated within the legacy media, and the troubling story about CNN providing Hillary Clinton her debate questions before the debate demonstrates the brazen nature of this corruption. What do you think had more potential to swing our recent presidential election? Providing one candidate her questions prior to the presidential debates, or some allegedly Russian-connected hacker hacking both the RNC and DNC databases but releasing only John Podesta's emails via WikiLeaks? That is the story behind the current Russia hacked the election mania sweeping the mainstream media today. The fact that the RNC was not hacked and knew that because they had called in the FBI last fall to determine if they had been hacked is irrelevant. The fact that John Podesta had fallen for a simple phishing scam due to miscommunication with his staff is irrelevant. The legacy media does not traffic in fact, it traffics in fear. Here's something you don't see every day. A famous news reporter, ABC's Martha Raddatz, being told the truth about our efforts in Afghanistan. She reported not one word of my excellent analysis, all of which has come to pass just about as I predicted, while being photobombed by the best Hogar agent America produced in the last decade. I can tell you that almost every legacy media story that came out of Afghanistan was essentially BS. Those who know the country well and were on the ground with the Afghans operating essentially as effects-based observers knew this to be true, which is why I started this blog. Am I saying all the media reports of the last decade out of Afghanistan were fake news? Of course not, but that's the point. I'm saying they were BS, but calling them fake news is impossible because these stories contained facts while covering the political angles behind our involvement, thus causing an infinite regress problem when it comes to fact-checking. Meghan McArdle, writing in Bloomberg, explains the problem well. The currency of politics is what we might call dubious statements, things that have some basis in truth, but which, through sins of mission or commission, are spun into better support for one's cause than the original material really offers. They are not as clearly false as, say, me claiming to be the Queen of Slovenia. But they are biased. Correcting for that bias is a tricky business, because of course, the fact-checkers themselves have biases. The exceptions are easy to spot because they are written by reporters with obvious background expertise. The best legacy reporter to cover our military involvements of the last 15 years is C.J. Chivers of the New York Times. Mr. Chivers, a former Marine Corps infantry officer, focused on the weapons and tactics employed by our adversaries, as well as writing detailed portraits of Americans in battle without attempting to fit them into a political narrative. Reporters the caliber of C.J. Chivers are rare, which is a requirement for the narrative because people with integrity and character do not traffic in fantasies like the Russians hacked the election and stole it from Hillary. But that's the current narrative, so now we have an outgoing president expelling Russian diplomats over something we know to be a blatant lie, and none of the legacy news coverage will focus on the fact that the entire story is not based in one iota of fact. It's fake news. But not as fake as the white supremacist allegations being wielded around willy-nilly in the press and on social media. Have any of you ever known a white supremacist? I remember one from back in 5th grade. He was an old white man who may have been blind but was clearly crazy, and he would sit out of his front porch. He lived next door to my friend T.J. Parker, and lecture us boys on how all the blacks should be sent back to Africa and that they were evil incarnate, on and on and on. We thought he was crazy and could not believe that adults talked that way. Even as children we never took that kind of talk seriously, and I know of no one since who would. I asked one of my kids when we were talking about the Trump victory if she could imagine what would happen if some stranger went up to an Islamic woman and tried to take her hijab off in front of me. She conceded that it would not go well for the assailant in that scenario, but insisted I'm not the typical Trump supporter. I say I am. I say you cannot punish people for being Muslim because all peoples who can contribute to our economy and want to join us are welcome. I also say Islam has no rights here and is not welcome to carve out spaces for itself in the United States. The narrative will allow this exact thing to happen in the name of diversity as it already has in France, England, and Sweden. Let us hope and pray that the narrative continues to be diminished by the arrival of adults on the national stage. But I won't know because I'm quitting the news fix and fixing to free range again. Happy New Year's to all who read this vlog regardless of country or origin, and hang tight. Change is coming and change is hard.
Now you're talking.
Happy New Year, kid!
Happy New Year! We're getting all the social.
Happy New Year, motherfuckers! I'm gonna sit over here.
Got the best video ever.